I'm Major Catherine Smith, 33 years old, and I built my career from the ground up. No shortcuts, no safety nets, just discipline and the uniform on my back. For years, I held my cousin together. Money, housing, support, second chances. Then he showed up with a hired SEAL team to force me out of my own home, and that was the moment everything changed. If you've ever been used, dismissed, or betrayed by someone you stood by, you'll understand this. Tell me your story in the comments. You're not the only one. Before I walk you through what happened, let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to finally stand up for yourself, hit like and subscribe for more real stories about boundaries, strength, and taking your power back. What happened next even I didn't expect. I grew up thinking Derek was invincible. He was 2 years older, all sharp edges and fearless grins, the kind of kid who climbed too high and talked too loud and somehow never got caught. I was the quiet one, the one who cleaned up messes and kept secrets. Our mothers were sisters, close enough that we lived 3 blocks apart in a town small enough that everyone knew everyone's business. Derek's father left when he was 6. Mine worked doubles at the plant. So we raised each other, in a way, with his mom's casseroles and my mom's strict curfews binding us together like family should. When I was 8 and he was 10, Derek convinced me to help him borrow Mr. Patterson's rowboat. We didn't get far before the thing started taking on water. I remember sitting in that sinking boat, Derek laughing like it was the best day of his life, while I bailed with a coffee can I'd had the sense to bring. That was us. He'd leap, I'd catch. He'd break things, I'd fix them. It felt natural then, like that's just what you did for the people you loved. Middle school brought new patterns. Derek struggled with algebra, so I'd spend my lunch periods walking him through equations he'd forget by the next day. He got into fights defending friends who didn't deserve it, and I'd talk him down before teachers noticed the bruised knuckles. When he wanted a leather jacket he couldn't afford, I gave him 3 months of babysitting money. He wore it everywhere for a year, and somehow that felt like enough repayment. Being needed felt like being valued. I didn't know yet that those weren't the same thing. High school split us in small ways. I joined ROTC my junior year, drawn to the structure and clarity of it. Put on the uniform, follow the standards, know exactly where you stand. Derek bounced between interests, played bass in a garage band for 3 months, talked about becoming a mechanic, took a job at his uncle's landscaping company that lasted 2 weeks. He'd show up at my house complaining about how nothing fit, how everyone expected too much. I'd listen, make suggestions he'd ignore, and watch him drift toward the next thing that promised easy answers. I enlisted in the Air Force through ROTC at 21, commissioned as a second lieutenant at 23. The day I pinned on those gold bars, Derek hugged me hard and said he was proud. Then he asked if I could co-sign a car loan. His credit was shot from 2 missed payments on a credit card I hadn't known he'd opened. I should have said no. The loan officer looked at me like she was trying to telegraph a warning, but I signed anyway. He promised he'd make every payment on time. He made 4. My first duty station was Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada. I was a 24-year-old first lieutenant learning logistics management and trying not to drown in the steep learning curve of active duty officer life. Derek stayed back home, working part-time jobs and calling me every few weeks with some crisis. His car got repossessed. My name on the loan meant my credit took the hit. He needed money for rent. He'd gotten into a bar fight and needed help with a lawyer. I wired money I should have been saving and justified it as family obligation. My squadron commander at the time, a sharp-eyed major named Reeves, asked me once if I was okay. I told him I was fine. He didn't look convinced. The promotions came on schedule. First lieutenant at 25, captain at 28. With captain's bars came more responsibility, better pay, and the realization that I'd spent 6 years managing Derek's life from a distance. I'd sent him over $15,000 in that time. Not all at once, $200 here for utilities, $800 there for car repairs, $1,000 when he got evicted and needed a deposit on a new place. It added up the way water fills a bucket, slow and steady until you're drowning. I bought a house when I was 29, a small 3-bedroom in a decent neighborhood near Nellis. It felt like the first real grown-up thing I'd done, something permanent and mine. Derek called 2 weeks after I closed. He'd been evicted again, he said. Just needed a place to crash for a month, maybe 2, until he got back on his feet. He'd pay rent, he promised. He'd help with utilities, with maintenance, whatever I needed. I'd heard these promises before, but he was family. You don't turn your back on family. He moved in with 2 duffel bags and a futon. The first month, he paid $300 toward rent. The second month, nothing. He'd lost another job, he said, but he had an interview lined up that was definitely going to come through. It didn't. He stopped looking. I'd come home from 12-hour shifts managing supply chain operations and find him on the couch, playing video games, surrounded by empty takeout containers. When I asked about job applications, he'd snap that I didn't understand how hard it was out there, how the economy was rigged, how nobody wanted to hire someone without a degree. I deployed to Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar for 4 months when I was 30. Before I left, I sat Derek down and told him he needed to contribute. Pay utilities at minimum. Keep the place clean. Start saving to get his own apartment. He nodded solemnly, assured me he understood, said he wouldn't let me down. I wanted to believe him. Some part of me still saw that 10-year-old kid in the sinking rowboat, laughing like the world couldn't touch him. I came back to a house that smelled like stale beer and neglect. Derek had stopped paying utilities month 2. I had 3 disconnection notices and a warning from the HOA about lawn maintenance. He'd had people over who left cigarette burns in the carpet and a crack in the bathroom mirror. When I confronted him, he didn't apologize. He said I was being dramatic, that I made enough money that a few missed bills shouldn't matter, that I was acting like I was better than him just because I wore a uniform. That's when I started noticing how he talked about me to other people. I heard it through my aunt first. Derek had told her I'd abandoned the family, gotten too big for my roots, forgot where I came from. He told our cousin Jenna that I'd forced him to join the military and then changed my mind, leaving him stranded. None of it was true, but he told the stories with such conviction that people half believed them. He was rewriting our history, casting himself as the victim of my success. The final straw came 3 months after I returned from deployment. I'd been selected for a temporary duty assignment to Langley Air Force Base, a 6-week training pipeline for senior captains being groomed for major. The day before I left, I told Derek he had until I got back to find his own place. No more extensions, no more excuses. He laughed. Actually laughed, like I'd told a joke. Then he said I didn't have the spine to kick him out, that I needed to be needed too much to ever really cut him loose. He was wrong. I came back from Langley with eviction paperwork and a lawyer's number. I gave him 30 days notice, legal and documented. He didn't take it seriously until day 28, when I changed the locks and had his belongings moved to a storage unit. That's when the threat started. I grew up thinking Derek was invincible. Turns out I was just the one who kept catching him. And eventually, your arms get tired. The messages started the day after I changed the locks. First, angry texts accusing me of betraying family, of thinking I was superior, of abandoning him when he needed me most. I didn't respond. My JAG attorney had advised me to document everything but engage with nothing. So I screenshotted each message, backed them up in 3 places, and went about my life. Derek had always needed an audience. Growing up, when he didn't get the attention he wanted, he'd escalate until he did. Break something valuable, pick a fight, create a crisis that required intervention. I'd watched him operate this way for 20 years, and I recognized the pattern playing out now in digital form. When I didn't take the bait on the angry texts, he switched tactics. He started telling people I'd stolen from him, that the house was supposed to be joint ownership, that I'd tricked him into signing away his rights, that I owed him tens of thousands of dollars. My aunt called me, confused and concerned. A childhood friend sent a cautious message asking if I was okay. I explained the truth once to each person who asked, calmly and without editorializing, and then I let it go. The people who knew me would believe me. The ones who didn't weren't worth convincing. At work, I kept my head down and my focus sharp. I was closing in on my 9th year of commission service, the point where promotion to major becomes realistic. My officer performance reports were strong. I'd led a successful deployment readiness exercise, managed a supply chain operation that saved the wing $300,000, and mentored 4 junior officers through their first duty stations. My squadron commander, Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Whitmore, had pulled me aside after a staff meeting to say she was putting me in for early promotion consideration. But Derek's spiral was accelerating, and it was starting to show up in my peripheral vision even when I tried to ignore it. He'd started hanging around a group of guys who called themselves private military contractors. I'd seen them once, when I drove past the bar where Derek spent most afternoons, 4 men in their late 30s and early 40s, all with that particular swagger that comes from military service that ended badly. Too much talk, not enough discipline. The kind of guys who wore tactical gear to the grocery store and had opinions about geopolitics they'd learned from podcasts. Their ringleader was a man named Marcus Hale. I looked him up after Derek started name-dropping him in increasingly unhinged voicemails. Hale had served in the Navy, made it to lieutenant, got out after 8 years. His LinkedIn profile listed him as CEO of Hale Security Solutions, which seemed to consist primarily of Facebook photos of him and his crew posing with weapons at desert ranges. He'd never deployed to a combat zone. He'd never led men under fire. But he'd convinced Derek and himself that he was running some kind of elite operation. Derek's messages took on a new tone once he fell in with Hale's group. Suddenly, he had resources. He had people who knew how to handle situations. He started making vague references to forcing me out of my own house, to teaching me a lesson, to showing me that I couldn't just discard family without consequences. The implied threats were clear enough that I forwarded everything to the base security forces and kept my off-duty carry permit current. I gave him one more chance. I called him from my office at 1300 hours on a Tuesday, when I knew he'd be awake, but hopefully not drunk yet. He answered on the 5th ring. "What do you want, Catherine?" "I want you to stop threatening me. I want you to move on with your life and let me move on with mine." He laughed, that same sharp bark he'd used as a kid when he thought he'd gotten away with something. "You think you can just throw me away? After everything? After everything, Derek, I gave you a place to live rent-free for 18 months. I gave you money, chances, support. You took all of it and threw it back in my face. You owe me," he said, and his voice had gone cold. "You owe me for all those years you used me to feel important. Poor little Catherine, always fixing broken Derek. Made you feel good about yourself, didn't it?" I could have argued. Could have listed every time I'd helped him, every dollar, every hour, every sacrifice. But he'd already decided on his version of history, and nothing I said would change it. "This is your last warning," I said instead. "Stay away from my property. Stay away from me. If you or your friends come near my house, I'll have you arrested." "Try it," he said. "I've got people now, Catherine. Real operators. Not like your Air Force paper pushers. You want to play hardball? Let's see how that works out for you." He hung up. I sat in my office, staring at the phone, feeling something shift in my chest. Not fear. I'd been in enough high-stakes situations at work to know how to manage fear. This was different. This was the feeling of watching someone you loved choose the worst possible version of themselves and knowing you couldn't stop it. I filed an incident report with security forces that afternoon. The staff sergeant who took my statement was thorough and professional. He noted the escalating threats, the references to third-party contractors, the implied intent to commit trespass and assault. He told me to call 911 immediately if Derek or anyone associated with him showed up at my home. He also suggested I might want to vary my route home and be aware of my surroundings. That night, I went to the range. I'd always been a good shot. It was part of what earned me my call sign years later, but I hadn't been practicing as much as I should. I spent 2 hours putting rounds through paper targets, focusing on breathing and trigger control and the meditative rhythm of load, aim, fire. By the time I left, my shoulders ached and my mind felt clear. I drove home as the sun set, checking my mirrors more than usual. The house was quiet and undisturbed. I made dinner, answered some emails, reviewed a training brief for the next day. Normal evening, normal life. But I double-checked the locks on all the doors and windows before bed, and I kept my phone on the nightstand with the emergency call screen ready. Derek sent one more message at 0200 hours. I woke up to the notification light blinking on my phone. "Try to take the house. I dare you. I've got people now." I didn't respond. I forwarded it to security forces, to my attorney, and to my chain of command. Then I tried to go back to sleep, knowing that whatever came next, I'd already done everything I could to prepare for it. I was in a conference room at Nellis reviewing a logistics brief when my phone buzzed with a text from my neighbor, Mrs. Chen. She was a retired schoolteacher who lived 2 houses down and had a direct sight line to my driveway. Her message was succinct. 3 vehicles at your house. Men unloading equipment. Should I call police? I excused myself from the meeting, stepped into the hallway, and called her. She picked up on the first ring. Catherine, I don't want to overreact, but there are 6 or 7 men in tactical clothing at your house. They have cases, equipment. One of them is your cousin. They're setting up like they're planning to stay. I kept my voice calm. Call 911. Tell them there's an attempted unlawful entry in progress. I'm on my way. I informed Lieutenant Colonel Whitmore, who told me to handle it and keep her updated. Then I drove home with my heart rate steady and my mind running through contingencies. I'd filed the proper paperwork. I had restraining order documentation ready to serve. I'd documented every threat. This was Derek's choice, not mine. I arrived 20 minutes later. 3 black SUVs were parked in my driveway and on the street in front of my house. Men in mismatched tactical gear stood around looking purposeful but disorganized. I recognized the setup immediately, guys playing operator without the discipline or command structure that made actual military units effective. Derek stood near the front door, arms crossed, grinning like he'd already won. Next to him was Marcus Hale, former Navy lieutenant, current CEO of Nothing That Mattered. Hale was tall, fit, probably mid-40s, with the kind of rigid posture that screamed insecurity. The other men ranged from late 30s to early 50s, all with that same try-hard energy. I parked on the street and got out slowly. Derek's grin widened. Decided to come home, Kath? You're gonna want to turn around. This isn't your house anymore. I didn't respond to him. I looked at Hale. You're trespassing on private property. I've already called the police. You have about 5 minutes to leave before this becomes a criminal matter. Hale stepped forward, chin up, chest out. Mr. Reeves has retained our services to secure this property. We're legally authorized contractors performing a lawful eviction. There's no lawful eviction happening here. I'm the sole owner of this property. Derek Reeves is a squatter who's been legally evicted. You're breaking the law. One of the other men, a thick-necked guy with a beard, snorted. Ma'am, with all due respect, you're one Air Force captain. We're 7 combat veterans. How do you think this plays out? I met his eyes. I think it plays out with all of you in handcuffs when the police arrive. But that's your call. Derek laughed. You always thought you were smarter than everyone, didn't you? Always had to be in control. Well, guess what? I'm in control now. Marcus, get her out of here. Hale hesitated. I could see him weighing options, trying to calculate how much trouble this would actually cause. Derek wasn't paying him enough for a felony charge. I'd have bet money on that. Sir, one of the other men said quietly to Hale. We should reconsider this. We're fine, Hale said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. She's bluffing. I wasn't bluffing. I also wasn't stupid enough to escalate physically with 7 men, regardless of their training or lack thereof. So I did what I'd been trained to do in high-stakes negotiations. I gave them information and let them make their own decision. Marcus Hale, former Navy lieutenant, 03, separated 2012. Tyler Brennan, former Navy E6, separated 2015 after an Article 15. Jake Morrison, former Army E5, dishonorable discharge 2014. Should I keep going? The thick-necked guy, Tyler Brennan, apparently went very still. How do you know that? Because I did my homework. Same way I documented every threat Derek made, every message, every contact. Same way I filed reports with security forces, got a restraining order signed, and ensured that everything I've done here is legally airtight. You're not operators on a mission. You're civilians committing criminal trespass. And when the police arrive, every one of you will be arrested. Hale's jaw tightened. Derek, you said she was just some logistics officer. She is, Derek said, but he sounded less certain now. She's a captain who clearly knows how to run an operation. Hale shot back. This is not what you told me. Sirens rose in the distance, growing louder. The men shifted, exchanging glances. 2 of them were already moving toward the SUVs. Last chance, I said. Leave now and maybe the police will let this slide as a misunderstanding. Stay and you're all catching charges. Hale stared at me for a long moment. Then he turned to his men. Pack it up. We're done here. What? Derek's voice cracked. You're just leaving? I paid you. You paid me for a consultation, not a felony, Hale said flatly. And you lied about the situation. We're out. The men moved fast, loading cases back into vehicles with the efficiency of people who'd suddenly remembered they had something to lose. Derek stood frozen, watching his leverage evaporate. The police arrived just as the last SUV pulled away. I explained the situation to the officers, showed them my documentation, and watched as they took Derek into custody for violating the restraining order. He didn't say anything as they cuffed him. Just stared at me with something between hatred and disbelief, like he couldn't understand how his little cousin had outmaneuvered him so completely. I gave my statement, provided copies of all the relevant paperwork, and answered questions until the officers were satisfied. Then I went inside my house, locked the door, and sat down at my kitchen table. My hands didn't shake. My breathing stayed even. I felt tired, but not rattled. Derek had brought 7 men to intimidate me into giving up my own home. He'd hired fake operators and threatened violence. And in the end, he lost because he'd never bothered to understand that real power doesn't come from intimidation. It comes from preparation, documentation, and the willingness to follow through. I made myself tea and started drafting an email to Lieutenant Colonel Whitmore. She'd want a full after-action report, and I intended to give her one. Professional, thorough, complete. Outside, the sun was setting. Inside, my house was quiet and mine. I'd protected what mattered. That felt like enough. But that wasn't the end. That was just the first act. The real confrontation came 3 nights later, after Derek posted bail and decided that humiliation required a stronger response. I found out later that Hale had refused to work with him again. Whatever Derek had paid him wasn't worth the liability, so Derek went looking for someone with less sense and more ego. He found them. Or maybe they found him. Either way, on a Thursday night at 2100 hours, my doorbell camera caught movement on my front porch. 6 men, dressed in actual tactical gear this time, better organized than Hale's crew. Leading them was someone I didn't recognize at first, a man in his early 40s, broad-shouldered, moving with the kind of confidence that comes from real experience. His name, I'd later learn, was Marcus Torrance. Former Navy SEAL, former E-7, dishonorably discharged after an incident in 2016 that he claimed was a misunderstanding and the Navy claimed was assault. He'd been running security contracts overseas, walking the line between legitimate work and mercenary activity, and apparently Derek had found him through some online forum where disgruntled veterans gathered to complain about the system. Derek was with them, standing back near the street, arms crossed. Watching. Waiting for vindication. I was home. I'd been expecting something like this. Derek's pattern of escalation was predictable once you understood it, so I'd prepared. My M40 sniper rifle, the one I'd qualified with during a cross-training exercise at Quantico years ago, sat on my kitchen table. I'd been cleaning it after a range session earlier that day. Not because I anticipated using it. Because I wanted anyone who came through that door to understand exactly who they were dealing with. The doorbell rang. I didn't answer. Cameras showed Torrance stepping up to the door, examining the frame, checking the locks. He said something to the men behind him. One of them moved forward with a breaching tool. I called 911 first. Gave my address, explained that armed men were attempting to force entry, said I was a military officer and that I was armed inside my residence. The dispatcher told me to stay on the line, that officers were en route, ETA 6 minutes. 6 minutes is a long time when someone's breaking down your door. The first impact echoed through the house. Solid door, good locks, but nothing stands up to a determined team with the right tools. I sat at the kitchen table, phone on speaker next to me, hands steady on the rifle. I wasn't pointing it at the door. I didn't need to. I just needed them to see it. Second impact. The frame splintered. Third impact, the door crashed open. Torrance came through first, weapon up, scanning corners like he'd been trained. His eyes found me immediately, sitting calmly at my kitchen table, 30 feet away, a disassembled sniper rifle in front of me, cleaning rod in hand. He froze. Evening, I said calmly. Police are 4 minutes out. You're trespassing on private property and committing felony home invasion. You should leave. One of the men behind Torrance muttered something I couldn't hear. Torrance held up a hand, stopping them from advancing further. Ma'am, we're here to assist with a property dispute. If you'll just, there's no property dispute. There's a delusional man who hired you to commit crimes on his behalf. You're smarter than this, Senior Chief. His eyes narrowed. How did your posture, your movement, your call sign on your plate carrier, your former SEAL Team 3, discharged 2016, currently operating in a legal gray zone doing contracts nobody wants their name attached to. Am I close? He didn't answer. Behind him, one of his men said quietly, Commander, we should go. You brought 5 men to threaten a single woman, I continued. But you came through that door expecting compliance, not resistance. Now you're doing the math. Is whatever Derek paid you worth a felony charge? Worth a firefight with responding officers? Worth whatever happens if this escalates? Torrance's jaw worked. I could see him running scenarios, weighing options. He was trained, experienced, professional. Which meant he knew when an operation had gone sideways. Derek told us you were a logistics officer, he said finally. I am a logistics officer. I'm also a captain in the United States Air Force with 9 years of service, a top-secret clearance, and a perfectly clean record I'd like to keep that way. You. One of his men stepped forward. Boss, police are coming. We need to move. Torrance looked at me for a long moment. Then he lowered his weapon. Fall back. We're out. What? Derek's voice came from outside, shrill and panicked. You're just leaving? I paid you $10,000. You paid me for a consultation that turned out to be based on false information, Torrance said coldly. Contract's void. We're done. They filed out quickly, professionally, leaving my broken door hanging on its hinges. Derek stood on my lawn, staring at me through the open doorway, his face twisted with rage and humiliation. You're going to regret this, he said. I already regret it, Derek. I regret every time I bailed you out, every dollar I gave you, every excuse I made. But that ends now. Police arrived 90 seconds later. I gave them the full story, showed them the camera footage, provided Torrance's information. The officers were thorough and professional. They took statements, documented the damage, issued an APB for Torrance and his crew. Derek was arrested again, this time with additional charges: conspiracy to commit home invasion, criminal trespass, destruction of property. Bail was set at $50,000. He didn't have it. Nobody would co-sign for him. He'd burned through every relationship that might have helped. I sat in my house that night, door temporarily secured with 2x4s until I could get it properly replaced, and felt something I hadn't felt in years: clarity. Derek had spent 2 decades taking from me, and I'd spent 2 decades letting him because I thought that's what family meant. But real family doesn't weaponize love. Real family doesn't hire armed men to terrorize you in your own home. I was done carrying him. Whatever happened next, he'd have to face it on his own. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Whitmore called me into her office the next morning. I'd sent her a detailed report at 0600 hours, knowing she'd want full visibility before anyone else in the chain of command started asking questions. When I arrived, she had 2 cups of coffee waiting and a look on her face I couldn't quite read. Sit, she said, and I did. She pushed one of the coffee cups toward me. I read your report. All of it. Including the supplemental documentation you attached. Yes, ma'am. Catherine, I'm going to ask you something, and I want an honest answer. Are you okay? I considered the question. Was I okay? My cousin had tried twice to force me out of my own home using hired muscle. My front door was destroyed. I'd spent the previous night with a loaded rifle within reach and police on speed dial. But I also felt calmer than I had in months. Clear-headed. Resolved. I'm okay, ma'am. Honestly, I think I'm better than I've been in a long time. Whitmore nodded slowly. I believe you. And that concerns me a little, if I'm being honest. Not because you're handling this badly, you're handling it exactly right. But because you shouldn't have to handle it at all. No, ma'am. I shouldn't. She leaned back in her chair. I want to tell you something, and I need you to hear it not as your commander, but as someone who's been where you are. About 8 years ago, my brother got into trouble. Drugs, mostly. He borrowed money he couldn't repay, made promises he wouldn't keep. I spent 3 years trying to fix him. Paid for rehab twice, let him live with me, vouched for him with employers. You know what it got me? Nothing, ma'am. Worse than nothing. It got me resentment. Because every time I helped him, I was telling him that he didn't have to face consequences. That someone would always be there to catch him. And he started to hate me for it because being helped made him feel weak. So he'd sabotage whatever progress he made just to prove he didn't need me. Then he'd come crawling back when things fell apart. It was a cycle, and I was enabling it by participating. I wrapped my hands around the coffee cup. What did you do? I stopped. Told him I loved him, but I wouldn't fund his destruction anymore. He accused me of abandoning family, said I was heartless, turned half our relatives against me. Didn't speak to me for 2 years. And now? Now he's been clean for 5 years. Has a job, an apartment, a life. He called me last Christmas and thanked me for cutting him off. Said it was the only thing that made him realize he had to change. Whitmore leaned forward. I'm not saying your cousin is going to have that revelation. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. But what I am saying is that you cannot carry people who won't walk on their own. And you're not cruel for refusing to. The words settled into me like puzzle pieces finding their place. I'd known this intellectually. I'd been trained in leadership principles, read about boundaries and enabling behavior, understood the theory. But hearing it from someone I respected, someone who'd lived it, made it real in a way the theory never had. Thank you, ma'am. Security forces is handling the criminal aspects, Whitmore continued, shifting back to business mode. But I've also flagged this with JAG and OSI in case your cousin or his associates try anything else. You're within your rights to request a threat assessment and additional security measures. I don't think that'll be necessary, ma'am. Derek's in custody and Torrance won't come back. He's a professional, even if he's a corrupt one. He knows this situation is radioactive. Your call. But the option's available if you need it. She paused. There's one other thing. Your majors board is coming up in 4 months. This incident is documented, but it reflects well on you. You handled a genuine threat with professionalism and appropriate force. That said, if you need time, if you need to talk to someone, that's available too. Taking care of yourself isn't weakness. I appreciate that, ma'am. I think I'm good. All right. Then get out of here. Take the day to get your door fixed and your house secured. That's an order, not a suggestion. I stood, collected my cover. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Walking back to my truck, I felt something shift in my chest. Not relief, exactly. More like the absence of weight. For years, I'd carried Derek's failures alongside my own responsibilities, and I hadn't realized how heavy that burden had become until I set it down. The contractor I'd called arrived at 10:00 hours to assess the door damage. He was a retired Air Force E-8, professional and efficient. While he took measurements and calculated materials, I sat on my porch and returned calls from relatives. My Aunt Linda called first. Catherine, I heard Derek was arrested. What happened? I gave her the facts, clean and simple, without editorializing. She was quiet for a moment. I owe you an apology. When Derek told me you'd kicked him out, I thought you were being harsh. I didn't realize how bad things had gotten. You didn't know because I didn't tell you. I was trying to protect him, and that meant keeping his worst behavior quiet. That's not your job, honey. No, it's not. My Uncle Michael called next, angrier. Your mother is sick over this. Derek's sitting in jail, and you put him there. Derek put himself there by hiring men to break into my home. Twice. He's family, Catherine. You don't do this to family. Family doesn't hire armed contractors to terrorize you, Uncle Michael. If you want to help Derek, post his bail and let him live with you. See how that works out. He hung up. I didn't call back. 2 cousins texted support. One said she'd always known Derek was trouble, but hadn't felt right saying anything. The other said she wished she'd set boundaries with her own brother years ago. I thanked them both and meant it. The door was replaced by 1,500 hours. The contractor did good work, installed a reinforced frame and a deadbolt that would take more than a breaching tool to get through. When he left, I locked the new door, tested it, and felt satisfied. I spent the evening doing normal things. Made dinner, watched a documentary, responded to work emails. Around 2,100 hours, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Captain Reeves. A man's voice, professional, unfamiliar. Speaking. This is Supervisory Special Agent Holland with OSI. I understand you've had some incidents involving your cousin and hired contractors. Yes, sir. It's all documented with security forces. I've reviewed those reports. I'm calling because one of the contractors involved, Marcus Torrance, has a history with federal agencies. We've been tracking his activities for 18 months. Your incident gives us probable cause for a deeper investigation. I wanted to give you a heads up that you may be contacted for additional statements. Understood, sir. I'm happy to cooperate. Good. And Captain? For what it's worth, you handled this situation exactly right. A lot of people would have escalated. You kept it professional. Thank you, sir. He hung up. I set the phone down and stared at it for a moment. Derek's attempt to intimidate me had accidentally exposed a federal investigation target. There was irony in that, the kind that would have made me laugh if it weren't so sad. I went to bed at 2200 hours, doors locked, alarm set. No rifle on the nightstand this time. Just my phone and the quiet confidence that I'd done everything right, everything necessary, everything I could have done. Derek made his choices. I'd made mine. And for the first time in years, I slept straight through the night without waking once. The consequences came fast and thorough, the way they do when you've spent years avoiding them and they finally catch up all at once. Derek spent 11 days in county jail before a public defender got him released on his own recognizance. The bail bondsman he'd contacted had refused to work with him after running a background check and seeing the charges. No collateral, no cosigners, no credibility. He walked out of jail owing money to a lawyer he couldn't pay, facing 3 felony charges and 2 misdemeanors, and he had nowhere to go. I heard this through my Aunt Linda, who called me weekly now with updates she thought I should know. She wasn't asking me to help, she'd learned that lesson, but she wanted me to understand what was happening. Derek had burned through the last of his friend group. The ex-military contractors who'd been his drinking buddies wanted nothing to do with him after the arrests. Marcus Torrance had apparently left the state entirely once OSI started asking questions. He's staying at a men's shelter, Linda said. St. Vincent's, downtown. He called me asking for money for a deposit on an apartment. I told him no. Good. It's hard, Catherine. He's still my nephew. I know. But helping him now means funding the same behavior that got him here. He needs to figure this out on his own. She sighed. You sound like your commander. Lieutenant Colonel Whitmore is a smart woman. Derek tried to contact me directly twice. First through a Facebook message sent from a new account he'd created after I'd blocked his old one. You destroyed my life. Hope you're proud of yourself. I screenshot it, sent it to my attorney, and blocked the new account. The second attempt came through a letter mailed to my home address. 3 pages, handwritten, rambling. It started with accusations. I'd always been jealous of him. I'd manipulated our family against him. I'd used my military connections to frame him for crimes he didn't commit. By page 2, it shifted to self-pity. Nobody understood how hard his life had been. Everyone had abandoned him. He'd made mistakes, but didn't deserve this. Page 3 ended with something that might have been an apology or might have been manipulation. I couldn't tell. I know I messed up. I just wish my own cousin hadn't decided I was disposable. I read it once, filed it with the rest of my documentation, and didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Derek had decided years ago that he was the victim of circumstances beyond his control, and no amount of evidence would change that narrative for him. At work, life continued with the steady rhythm of military routine. I led a logistics training exercise, reviewed supply chain protocols, mentored a newly commissioned second lieutenant who reminded me of myself at 23, eager, confident, and slightly overwhelmed by the scope of responsibility. Lieutenant Colonel Whitmore assigned me as the executive officer for an upcoming deployment readiness inspection, a role typically reserved for officers being groomed for promotion. You're on track for Major, she told me during an officer professional development session. Your package is strong. Leadership skills, technical competence, demonstrated performance under pressure. The board would be foolish not to select you. Thank you, ma'am. I'm putting you in for early consideration. That means the board convenes in January instead of June. You'll pin on before your 10th year of service if they select you. Early promotion to Major. It should have felt triumphant, but mostly it felt like confirmation that I'd made the right choices. I'd protected my home, maintained my professionalism, refused to let Derek's chaos compromise my career. The military rewards discipline and competence. I'd demonstrated both. The criminal case against Derek moved through the system slowly. His public defender negotiated a plea deal, 2 years probation, court-ordered counseling, restitution for the door damage, and a permanent restraining order prohibiting him from coming within 500 feet of me or my property. Derek accepted it, probably because the alternative was trial and potential prison time. I didn't attend the sentencing hearing. My attorney represented my interests, and that was enough. I didn't need to see Derek standing in front of a judge. I didn't need closure or an apology I wouldn't believe. I needed him out of my life, and the legal system had provided that. Marcus Torrance and his crew faced federal charges related to unlicensed security contracting and weapons violations uncovered during OSI's investigation. Turned out they'd been running operations without proper permits, transporting firearms across state lines illegally, and falsifying credentials. My incident had been the thread that unraveled a much larger problem. Special Agent Holland called me once to thank me for my cooperation. I told him I was just protecting my home. He said sometimes that's enough. 6 months after the door-breaking incident, I pinned on Major at a small ceremony in the squadron conference room. My parents flew in from home. A few friends from my commissioning class showed up. Lieutenant Colonel Whitmore administered the oath and pinned the oak leaves on my shoulders herself. "You've earned this," she said quietly. "Not just through your work, but through your character. You stood up for yourself when it would have been easier to give in. That takes courage." "Thank you, ma'am." My mother hugged me afterward, tears in her eyes. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart." My father shook my hand, firm and steady. "You did the right thing with Derek." "I know that wasn't easy." "No, sir. It wasn't. But it was necessary," he said. "And you had the strength to do it anyway. That's what makes you a good officer." I'd spent years thinking that being strong meant enduring, carrying burdens, sacrificing for others. I was learning that sometimes strength meant setting down what you couldn't carry, meant saying no, meant protecting yourself even when it hurt to do it. The promotion party was small and comfortable. A few squadron members, some friends, my parents. We ate barbecue and told stories and celebrated the way military people do, with good humor and mutual respect and the understanding that rank is earned through more than just time in service. Lieutenant Colonel Whitmore pulled me aside near the end of the evening. "How are you doing?" "Really? Really?" "I'm good, ma'am. Better than I've been in a long time." "No regrets about how you handled Derek?" "I thought about it. I regret that it came to that. I wish he'd made different choices. But I don't regret protecting myself. And I don't regret holding boundaries." She nodded. "Good. Because you're going to spend the rest of your career making hard decisions. Some of them will involve cutting loose people or programs or plans that aren't working. You can't lead effectively if you're too afraid to make those calls." "Yes, ma'am. I understand that now." "I know you do. That's why I'm recommending you for a squadron commander track when you hit 05. You've got the judgment and the spine for it." The evening ended with handshakes and congratulations and promises to keep in touch. I drove home alone, oak leaves heavy on my shoulders in the best possible way, and felt settled in a way I hadn't since before Derek moved into my house. The next morning, I woke up early and went for a run. 5 miles through the desert dawn, steady pace, clear head. When I got back, I showered, made breakfast, and sat down at my kitchen table with my laptop to review the week's work schedule. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. For a second, my stomach tightened, old habit, old fear. But when I opened it, the message was from my cousin Jenna. "Congratulations on Major. You earned it. P.S. Derek's doing okay. He's got a job at a warehouse, seeing his probation officer, staying clean. Thought you'd want to know. You don't have to respond." I stared at the message for a long moment. Derek was doing okay. Not because I'd helped him. Because I'd stopped. I didn't respond. But I saved the message anyway, filed it away with all the other documentation. Evidence that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is refuse to enable them anymore. Then I closed my phone, finished my coffee, and got ready for work. Major Catherine Reeves, United States Air Force, with a clean record and a clear conscience. That felt like victory enough. 2 years passed. Not slowly, not quickly, just steadily. The way time moves when you're focused on work that matters and a life that's finally yours. I made Major when I was 33 years old. By 35, I was the executive officer for a logistics squadron at Nellis, managing 120 personnel and a budget that would have given 23-year-old me a panic attack. The work was demanding, complex, and exactly what I'd trained for. I was good at it. More importantly, I enjoyed it. Derek existed somewhere in my peripheral awareness, the way distant relatives do. Occasional updates through family channels, vague knowledge that he was still alive and functioning, but no direct contact and no desire for it. The restraining order had been extended after his probation ended. He'd complied with its terms, made no attempts to reach out, stayed in his lane. According to Aunt Linda, who still called me monthly, he'd held down his warehouse job for 18 months now. That was the longest he'd kept any job since high school. I didn't follow his progress closely. It wasn't my responsibility anymore, and I'd made peace with that. Sometimes my mother would mention him carefully, testing to see if I wanted to talk about it. I didn't. There was nothing to say. Derek had made his choices. I'd made mine. We both had to live with the consequences. What I did notice over those 2 years was how much lighter my life felt. I'd spent so long carrying Derek's chaos that I hadn't realized how much space it took up. Without it, I had energy for things I'd been too exhausted to pursue. I took a photography course. Started rock climbing at an indoor gym on base. Mentored 3 junior officers through their first assignments, helping them navigate the challenges I remembered from my own early career. Lieutenant Colonel Whitmore retired after 30 years of service. At her going away, she pulled me aside and said, "You're going to make a hell of a squadron commander someday. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." Her replacement, Colonel James Hernandez, called me into his office my second week under his command. "I've reviewed your record, Major. Impressive. You're on the short list for Squadron Command at 05. I'm going to push hard for your selection." "Thank you, sir." Lieutenant Colonel Whitmore left me notes on all her key officers. "Yours said, and I quote, Catherine Reeves has the judgment, discipline, and courage to make hard calls under pressure. Put her in command and get out of her way." I felt something catch in my throat. She was a hell of a mentor, sir. She was. Live up to that recommendation, Major. That's all I ask. I intended to. Work consumed most of my energy in the best possible way. I was evaluating deployment logistics for an upcoming exercise, overhauling our supply tracking systems, and reviewing officer development plans. At night, I'd come home to my quiet house, make dinner, read, sleep well. No crises. No chaos. Just steady, professional progress. In month 23 of the 2-year gap, my Aunt Linda called with different news. "Catherine, I wanted to tell you before you heard it somewhere else. Derek's getting married." I paused in the middle of chopping vegetables for dinner. "Married?" "Her name is Maria. She works at the warehouse with him. They've been dating for about a year. He seems settled. Different. I don't know if it'll last, but he seems to be trying." "That's good. I'm glad for him." He asked if you'd be willing to come to the wedding. "Small ceremony, just family." I told him I'd ask, but you'd probably say no. "You told him correctly." Linda sighed. "I figured." He said he understood. Said he doesn't blame you. I didn't respond to that. Derek could claim understanding all he wanted, but showing up at his wedding would send a message I didn't intend to send, that we were okay, that time had healed things, that we could go back to some version of family normalcy. We couldn't. We wouldn't. The restraining order was still active for a reason. "I wish him well," I said instead. Genuinely. "But I'm not going to be part of his life, Linda. That boundary isn't changing." "I know, honey. I just had to ask." 3 weeks later, I got notification that I'd been selected for promotion to Lieutenant Colonel, 05, pending completion of professional military education and Command Selection Board results. The letter came through official channels, signed by a brigadier general I'd never met, and it represented the culmination of 13 years of service, countless deployments and TDYs, thousands of hours of training and leadership development. I called my parents first. They were thrilled, proud, asking when the ceremony would be. I called a few close friends from my commissioning class. Most of them were tracking toward 05 as well, and we compared timelines and assignments and joked about getting old. That night, alone in my house, I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd once sat cleaning a rifle while armed contractors reconsidered their life choices, and let myself feel satisfied. Not triumphant, not vindicated, just quietly satisfied. I'd built a career through competence and discipline. I'd protected my home and my boundaries when it mattered. I'd made hard choices and lived with them without regret. Derek existed somewhere, working his warehouse job, planning a wedding, maybe actually changing. Or maybe just going through the motions until the next crisis. Either way, it wasn't my problem anymore. He'd gotten exactly what I'd always wanted for him, the chance to sink or swim on his own merit. If he swam, good. If he sank, that was on him. I thought about that night 2 years ago, sitting here with a rifle on the table, waiting for men with bad intentions to come through my door. I thought about the moment Marcus Torrance had frozen in the doorway, realizing he'd miscalculated. I thought about Derek screaming from the lawn while his hired muscle abandoned him. I hadn't lifted my weapon. Hadn't needed to. The threat alone had been enough, because it was backed by confidence, by preparation, by the absolute certainty that I would do what was necessary to protect what was mine. That's what people like Derek never understood. Power isn't about intimidation. It's about capability and the will to use it. It's about knowing your limits and holding your ground anyway. It's about saying no and meaning it. I'd spent 20 years being Derek's safety net. When I finally stopped, he'd tried to force me back into that role through threat and violence. And he'd learned, the hardest way possible, that some people can't be forced. Some boundaries can't be broken. Some women won't back down no matter how many men you bring. I finished my tea, rinsed the cup, turned off the lights. Tomorrow, I'd go back to work, continue building a career I was proud of, mentor officers who needed guidance, serve with honor and professionalism. The same things I'd been doing all along. Derek could keep his warehouse job, his wedding, his new chance at life. I hoped it worked out for him. I genuinely did. But whether it did or didn't, I'd be fine. I'd built something solid, something mine, something nobody could take away because I'd been willing to defend it. That felt like everything I needed to know. The call came from an unknown number on a Tuesday afternoon while I was reviewing quarterly logistics reports. I almost didn't answer, operational focus, minimal distractions, but something made me pick up. Major Reeves? A man's voice, hesitant, slightly familiar. Speaking. This is Derek. I set down my pen. Outside my office window, an F-16 took off from the flight line, the roar of its engines muffled by thick glass. I watched it climb into the Nevada sky while I chose my next words carefully. You're in violation of the restraining order by calling me. I know. I'm sorry. I needed to talk to you. Just once. Please. I could have hung up. Should have hung up, documented the call, reported the violation. But curiosity held me on the line, not curiosity about what he wanted, but curiosity about who he'd become after 3 years of facing consequences alone. You have 2 minutes. He exhaled shakily. I'm getting married in 3 weeks. Maria. She's good for me. Keeps me grounded. And she asked about you, about why you're not coming to the wedding, and I had to tell her everything. The whole truth, not the version I'd been telling myself. Good for you. I told her how I used you. How I took your money, your house, your help, and I never gave anything back. How I blamed you for setting boundaries I should have respected. How I brought armed men to your house because I couldn't accept that I destroyed your trust. I said nothing. Let him fill the silence. Maria said I needed to apologize. Really apologize. Not ask for anything, not try to fix things, just acknowledge what I did. So that's what I'm doing. I'm sorry, Catherine. I'm sorry I spent 20 years taking and never giving. I'm sorry I threatened you. I'm sorry I made you feel unsafe in your own home. I'm sorry I turned family against you. I'm sorry I never appreciated what you did for me until it was too late. The apology landed somewhere in my chest, unexpected and uncomfortable. I'd stopped expecting one, stopped needing one, moved on without it. Now here it was, years late and possibly worthless, and I didn't know what to do with it. Okay, I said. I don't expect you to forgive me. Maria said I shouldn't even ask for that. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand what I did. And I'm trying to be different. I have a job. I'm paying my bills. I'm going to therapy, court mandated at first, but I kept going after probation ended because it helps. I'm trying to be the person you always thought I could be. That's good, Derek. I'm glad you're doing better. Are you happy? The question surprised me. Yes, I am. Good. You deserve that. You always did. He paused. I heard you made Lieutenant Colonel. Congratulations. Thank you. I won't call again. I promise. I just needed you to hear this. Needed to say it out loud to you, not just to my therapist or Maria. You deserve that much. I looked at the picture on my desk, me and my flight, taken during a deployment to Qatar, all of us dusty and exhausted and grinning. Good people doing hard work together. My life now. Derek, I accept your apology. And I mean that genuinely. But the restraining order stays in place. We're not going to have a relationship. We're not going to rebuild family ties. You hurt me too badly for too long, and I've built a life that doesn't include you. That's not punishment. It's protection. I understand. I really do. And I respect that. Then I wish you well with Maria. I hope the marriage works out. I hope you keep making progress. But do it for yourself, not for me. I'm not watching anymore. Thank you, Catherine, for everything you did. And for stopping when you needed to. I think that's when I finally had to grow up. He hung up. I set the phone down and stared at it for a moment, processing. An apology I hadn't expected. Acknowledgement I'd stopped needing. Evidence that people can change, sometimes, when they run out of other options. I felt nothing dramatic. No flood of relief, no surge of forgiveness, no desire to reconcile. Just a quiet sense of confirmation that I'd made the right choice 3 years ago. Derek was doing better because I'd stopped enabling him. My life was better because I'd enforced boundaries. Both things could be true simultaneously. I picked up my pen and went back to my logistics reports. Tomorrow I had a meeting about deployment timelines. Next week, a leadership training session with junior officers. Next month, professional military education courses that would prepare me for O5 command positions. Derek could have his wedding, his warehouse job, his therapy sessions, his growth. I was genuinely glad for him. But that was his story now, not mine. Mine involved promotion boards and squadron readiness metrics and mentoring the next generation of Air Force officers. At 1700 hours, I locked my office and drove home. The house I defended 3 years ago with nothing but presence of mind and a disassembled rifle. The home that was mine and mine alone, earned through work I was proud of, protected through boundaries I'd enforced. I made dinner, answered some emails, read for an hour before bed. Normal evening, normal life. No crises, no chaos, no cousin who needed saving. Just the steady rhythm of a career I'd built and a life I'd chosen. That night, I slept well. No dreams of broken doors or armed men or family members who couldn't be saved. Just deep, restful sleep, the kind you earn by making hard choices and living with them without regret. Derek had apologized. That was good. It didn't change anything, but it was good. I'd moved on years ago. That was better. 5 years after the night armed contractors broke down my door, I took command of the 743rd Logistics Readiness Squadron at Nellis Air Force Base. The ceremony was formal, traditional, the passing of the guidon from the outgoing commander to me, the reading of orders, the assumption of responsibility for 230 personnel, and a mission critical to every flying operation on base. My parents sat in the front row. My younger sister, now a dentist in Colorado, flew in for the weekend. A handful of friends from my commissioning class showed up in dress blues, older now, graying at the temples, wearing the rank insignia of majors and lieutenant colonels. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Whitmore, retired but still sharp-eyed and present, stood near the back with her arms crossed and a satisfied smile on her face. Colonel Hernandez administered the oath. Do you, Catherine Marie Reeves, having been appointed an officer in the Air Force of the United States, solemnly swear that you will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic? I'd taken this oath before. At commissioning, 15 years ago. At every promotion. But this time felt different. This was command. This was authority and responsibility condensed into a single role, the weight of every decision settling onto my shoulders with the squadron guidon. I do solemnly swear. The change of command ceremony lasted 45 minutes. Speeches about readiness, logistics, mission assurance. The outgoing commander, a sharp officer headed to a staff position at Air Force Materiel Command, gave a gracious farewell. I gave brief remarks about leadership philosophy and operational excellence. Then the guidon passed hands, the squadron saluted, and I walked off the field as commander, 743rd Logistics Readiness Squadron. The reception afterward was crowded, loud, full of well-wishers and squadron members sizing up their new commander. I shook hands, made small talk, answered questions about my vision for the unit. Professional, approachable, confident. Everything a commander should be. Sarah Whitmore found me near the end of the reception. Congratulations, Catherine. You've earned this. Thank you, ma'am. For everything you taught me. I didn't teach you the important parts. You figured those out yourself. She paused. You remember what I told you years ago? About my brother. I do. He's 5 years clean now. Married, has a kid, manages a construction crew. We have dinner once a month. It took him hitting bottom completely before he climbed back up. But he did climb, once he had to. I'm glad for him. And for you, Derek. I hesitated. Last I heard, he's still working at the warehouse. Married 3 years now. Hasn't tried to contact me since that one phone call. I think he's okay. As okay as he's going to be. And you? I looked around the reception hall. My squadron, my command, my career. I'm better than okay, ma'am. I'm exactly where I want to be. She squeezed my shoulder. Good. Now go lead those people the way I know you can. The first month of command was intense, learning the unit, understanding personnel dynamics, identifying problems, establishing standards. I held town halls, walked the flight line, met with section chiefs, reviewed operational procedures. The squadron was solid but complacent, comfortable with good enough when excellent was achievable. I started changing that immediately. 6 weeks into command, my first sergeant, a tough senior master sergeant named Martinez with 22 years of service, stopped by my office. Commander, you're pushing hard. Some folks are grumbling. Are we meeting standards or exceeding them, senior? Exceeding them, ma'am. Best readiness numbers we've had in 3 years. Then the grumbling is growing pains, not real problems. Keep the pressure on. He grinned. Yes, ma'am. Just wanted to make sure you knew what you were doing. I know exactly what I'm doing, senior. Trust me. He did. They all did, eventually. Results speak louder than complaints. By month 4, the 743rd was the top-performing logistics squadron on base. By month 8, we were setting records. By the end of my first year in command, we'd received outstanding ratings on every inspection and exercise. I pushed my people hard, but I backed them completely. When one of my young airmen made $1 million mistake processing a parts order, I took the heat from above and used it as a teaching moment below. When a maintenance crew worked 72 hours straight to recover a downed aircraft, I fought for their time off and wrote impact statements that got 3 of them awards. Lead from the front, protect your people, hold the standards. It wasn't complicated. Derek existed somewhere in the background of my consciousness, a footnote to an old story. My mother mentioned him occasionally, still married, apparently stable, working his way up to shift supervisor at the warehouse. I felt nothing about this information beyond mild satisfaction. He'd found his level, his sustainable pace. Good for him. I never questioned my decision to cut him off. Never wondered if I'd been too harsh or if I should have given him one more chance. The evidence was clear. He'd needed to fail on his own before he could succeed on his own. My continued enabling would have kept him in perpetual adolescence. Walking away had been the kindest thing I could have done, even if he'd hated me for it at the time. 2 years into squadron command, Colonel Hernandez called me to his office. Catherine, I'm putting you in for 06. Full colonel. You've crushed it as squadron commander. Your unit leads the base in every category. I want you on the command track for group leadership. 06. Full colonel. The senior officer rank that determined whether you stayed in leadership or plateaued. The rank that opened doors to wing command, major command positions, strategic leadership. Thank you, sir. I'm honored. Don't be honored yet. Be ready. The board meets in 6 months. Your package needs to be flawless. I'll help you build it, but you need to keep performing at this level. Yes, sir. That won't be a problem. It wasn't. The 743rd continued to excel. My leadership philosophy, high standards, clear expectations, genuine care for people, created a culture where excellence became normal. Officers asked to transfer into my squadron. Enlisted troops re-enlisted at rates above base average. We became the unit everyone wanted to be part of. My personal life stayed deliberately quiet. I dated occasionally, nothing serious. Spent weekends hiking Red Rock Canyon or taking photographs in the desert. Read extensively military history, leadership theory, biographies of people who'd done hard things well. I didn't need chaos or drama. I'd had enough of that to last a lifetime. 3 years into Squadron Command, I pinned on '06 at a small ceremony in the wing conference room. Full Colonel, United States Air Force, with 20 years of service and a record that spoke for itself. My parents cried. My sister cheered. Sarah Whitmore, still showing up for milestones, saluted me crisply and said, "Knew you'd make it, Catherine. Now keep going." "Yes, ma'am. That's the plan." That evening, alone in my house, I stood in front of the mirror in my dress blues, looking at the eagle insignia on my shoulders. Colonel. Senior officer. Leader. Mentor. Commander. 20 years ago, I'd been a second lieutenant fresh out of ROTC, trying to figure out how to be an officer while simultaneously trying to save a cousin who didn't want to be saved. 10 years ago, I'd been a captain dealing with escalating threats and armed contractors, and the painful realization that love without boundaries isn't love at all, it's enabling. Now I was a colonel with a track record of excellence, a reputation for solid leadership, and the kind of life I'd built deliberately through hard choices and clear boundaries. Derek was somewhere living his quiet life. I was here, living mine. Both of us had grown, just in different directions. I'd become the officer I'd always wanted to be. He'd become whoever he was now, maybe better, maybe not, but either way it was his to manage. I changed out of my dress blues, made dinner, settled in with a book about logistics operations during World War II. Normal evening, normal life. No crises, no chaos, no cousin who needed saving. Just me, my career, my choices, and the absolute certainty that I'd made the right ones. That felt like victory. That felt like peace. That felt like enough. That's how it unfolded the night my own cousin tried to intimidate me, and the moment I stopped carrying someone who refused to carry himself. If you've ever had to cut off a toxic relative, would you do it again? Have you ever been pushed so far that your only choice was to stand your ground? And what's the hardest boundary you've ever had to set? Drop your answers in the comments. I read all of them. If this story hit home, tap like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it.